I'm Damien Barrett and welcome to Access All Areas. The week off made it feel like a long time coming, but Matthew Lloyd, what a great opening week of the final series.
It was sensational. Who would have thought that the Western Bulldogs could do that to the West Coast Eagles on Thursday night? And now we've got 6 quality sides. You don't say that all the time about 6 sides still to go. North obviously showed they're just not good enough. West Coast, that was a shock loss. But the remaining 6 teams, the finals could go any way from here.
Question marks to come out of a few issues, Lotto, but the headline act out of the weekend surely was the GWS.
It was, because I thought we all thought the lack of experience was going to hurt them. But they had 15 guys who hadn't played a final before, and they were just brutal. They were absolutely brutal on the Sydney Swans, and they actually beat the Sydney Swans at their own game. Some of these highlights here, the toughness. Lachie Whitfield played his best game of the year, and it was moments like that, Damo, where he was just tough. Cameron loves physicality. You know, we'll see Jacob Hopper later. Devon Smith, he laid actually 10 tackles on the weekend. Ryan Griffin and Shield laid 9 tackles each. Cameron played his best game. It was just breathtaking footy, both in terms of their attacking run and their physicality.
On exposed form, there was no issue, was there, as we went into this game? But what the unknown was what would this team be able to handle the occasion? And I think they removed all doubts within the first 15 minutes, and there's no now reason for us to think they cannot keep going, is it?
Yeah, that's right, Dane. I think the question was the inexperience, but then now they've handled that. You ask yourself, what is their weakness? I think their back line is first class, doesn't lack for anything. Phil Davis kept Buddy goalless. Their midfield bats deeper, I think, than any midfield, and their forward line is star-studded. So I'm not sure what their weakness is at all.
Well, they might have a weakness or a hole to fill on the half-forward line with Stevie Johnson, with this issue on Josh Kennedy. As we speak, Lotto, the match review panel is yet to come down officially with this finding, but the way I read it, there is no way he can play in a preliminary final on the back of that.
No, that's not accidental. And obviously we hate seeing players miss finals, but you've got to call it as you see it. What's he trying to do here? The ball's gone somewhere else and he's still charged through. So I think he at least has to get a week for that.
Yeah, I'm of the same view, and I think he's probably fortunate that that there may be a lenient finding, that it will be 2 down to 1, because I think under a certain ruling you can make that 3 down to 2 if you want it to be really, really hard. Hey, the Swans forward line had been much lauded all year, yet when it came to the crunch in a qualifying final, they went missing.
Yeah, they did, and I think Lance Franklin was too high early. I think he played a solid first half, but he didn't hit the scoreboard. And when you get no goals out of your top 4, Franklin, Heaney, Parker and Rowan, you're going to struggle to win games. So at the SCG, those guys have to at least kick 10 between them this week, otherwise the Crows will get them.
We often query the losing qualifying finalists, don't we? We think that they may have fallen off the pace. Do you think that of the Swans, and do you still think that the premiership is alive in their hopes?
Oh, well, going in, I thought they were the premiership favourites, but they were blown off the park. If you can match Sydney on the inside, I think you can get them for speed on the outside. Now, no Kurt Tippett, broken jaw, being ruled out. Callum Mills, he and Rampy are the best 2 layoff players just about in the game. Mills now gone, so it puts enormous pressure on that top 4 midfield, the star-studded midfield, and now Lance Franklin, you'd think, has to kick 4 or 5 goals this week if they are to beat the Crows. The Crows could nearly go in as favourite with no Tippett and Mills.
Yeah. Go back to Friday night, Lotto. Another classic chapter in this already epic series between Geelong and Hawthorn. We see there with 34 seconds left, this is the now infamous play of Hawthorn in the dying seconds, where Lewis mongrels it to Burgoyne, to Duray, and then Bruce has even time, despite there not being much of it, to make a mistake and still get the ball to Isaac Smith. It was an incredible finish to an incredible game.
Yeah, it was one of the great finals games you'll ever see, and it had people talking about, is it one of the best we've seen in the last 30 years, and you just were sitting there, I was there, Damo, and you're thinking, they've done it again here, Hawthorn. How do they do it? They've won 6 games by under 9 points this year, but unfortunately, Isaac Smith, who's been a great finals player over time, just couldn't get the job done there.
Look, there's so many ways to look at this, and people have been critical of maybe whatever facial expression Isaac Smith had. I don't buy into that. I just think he had he's got a big mouth guard, he's got a toothy sort of grit. There's no issue with that. And look, he just missed a kick at goal, and he's fatigued. Now, what we're going to do now is go behind the scenes, and I want you to forensically pull apart how Isaac Smith could find so much space at that late stage of the game, if you can.
No doubt. The first circle we go in the centre of the corridor, that's Reece Stanley, and he's got Jack Gunston there, and the 2 players there are Menegola, and the player there is Isaac Smith, who has the shot for goal. So Reece Stanley's the one that lets things down here. He did not want to go. He didn't want to go with Jack Gunston, so we see him at the goal square. We see Gunston in the pocket, and there is Isaac Smith. So Menegola, unfortunately, has had to say, who's the most dangerous player? He thought it was going to be Gunston. Stanley's just standing there, manning up no one. So he's very, very fortunate. He's hunched now at the top of the goal square. He's very, very lucky that this shot was missed. It'll still be analysed forensically, and he really put over the hot coals for that one. It's just not good enough there from Reece Stanley, who's one of the fittest guys going around.
So this is exclusive AFL.com.au vision, Lauder. So you're not as critical here of Menegola as you are Stanley.
Well, you don't stay with your man. You go to the most dangerous man. So Menegola's thinking.
So he's got the right to go to Gustin there.
You go to whoever's the most dangerous.
Even though Smith's in a better position.
Yeah, in hindsight, an inexperienced 7-game player, he should go to the corridor, stay in the corridor, because it's the most hardest. It's a harder kick for Gunston, to score, and all that sort of thing. But Reece Stanley was the one. There was a couple of players there who were manning a space instead of a man there. So,
but there's fatigue obviously at play here, and that's probably the key factor. But Chris Scott won't be happy with that.
He won't, and even Motlop. I wonder what Chris Scott would say to Motlop about taking a couple of shots from the boundary line. Late in the game with 30 seconds to go, should he have kept it in tight and forced the ball up or something?
The only problem with that is you run the risk of being either taking the ball out of bounds and they having a free kick paid against you, or for holding the ball, don't you?
But I think you'd rather it be in the pocket with the ball up, or rather than a kick in where they can get the fast play going.
Hey, the Swans forwards did not fire, but a group of forwards who did fire were the Adelaide Crows on their particular game.
Oh yeah, they took 21 contested marks to North's 12. The inside 50 marks were 19 to 10. And no doubt they're the best forward line in the game. It all comes down to, can their midfield give them enough supply, and can their back line hold up under the pressure?
And do you think the answers to those questions are yes and yes?
No to the midfield and no to the back line.
Right.
Their forward line is better than anyone's, as I said. They just need supply. And Brodie Smith was back, and he had 900 metres gained, which is just about a record, I would have thought. And him and Sloane back in the team changed the whole dynamic. But they played North Melbourne, who are a clear 8th best side.
Yeah, and lucky to be 8th.
Yeah, and the jury still, we'll find out big time at the SCG with how good the Crows are this week.
Yeah, sure. Just on the Roos, we know that they butchered the public narrative around the exits of those 4 big names. They've now got a situation where Daniel Wells has yet to commit. And you know my view, when you get to the final game of a season and you're yet to actually sign away, there's a clear issue there. And Collingwood is the club now making the play for him. And they've got some questions, Lotto. You can't get to 9-0 and then basically concede the season is done a fortnight before you start a final series. And I think they really need to have a proper review as to how it unfolded, particularly in those stretch of matches between round 10, their first loss against Sydney Swans, through to about round 17, 18, when they clearly made their mind up, they were done. Oh,
when you win 2 from your last, 13 games, it's just unbelievable, the fall from grace for North Melbourne. At the start of the year, Wake, Petrie, Brown couldn't be stopped. You had Wells covering the ground beautifully. All those guys really dropped away as the year went on. They're 1 to 4 year players. Could you name a good one? So that's a real issue for them. And then you hear them being linked again to Nathan Brown at Collingwood and Hamish Hartlett and all this sort of thing. They've got to get their bottom-end younger players through the draft going and forget about older players for now. I think they've just got to grow from within, because I just don't see anyone at all coming through, and it could be a huge fall for them next year and the year after.
And is Brad Scott the right man for it?
I believe that in a perfect world, that maybe a fresh start would be right for North Melbourne, and Brad Scott, I think he's still good enough to be coaching, and that's who I thought would be perfect for Brisbane. But 2 years left of a contract, I don't think he'll be going.
Yeah, and when you've had 7 years, and the 7th year was the one where you forecast to really hit a high point, and you fall short, and you concede you're falling short before you hit the final series. I do think that a proper review needs to be done. Maybe not as rigorous as Richmond's, but something that they don't intend to be doing. Hey, Jack Darling, a bit like West Coast, his team had a poor grand final last year, and this was the incident that he had to live with all summer and has lived with. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt there, Lordo. Maybe sun was in his eyes, but you can't have him doing this, can you?
No. That's you hate having to do this to players, but we critique everything, and that was a moment that even Adam Simpson, his coach, said, there's no excuses for that. You'd rather be steamrolled and run through than doing that, So it's disappointing.
Will they be scarred from that the past 2 finals they've played was a humiliating loss to Hawthorn in a grand final, and that happens. But when you then have a response in your next elimination final that way, is there scarring there? I mean, LaCroix, he's been a great player for West Coast, but is his time nearly out?
Yeah, I heard that he hasn't kicked more than 2 in a final, Mark LaCroix. So he's continually let himself down in finals. Elliot Yeo, good home and away player, not a great performer. As good as Josh Kennedy's been in home and away football, doesn't have a great finals record. Cripps and Hill, big question marks on them in big games again. So, and then Jack Darling. So, great run into the finals, but they were just blown away, shell shocked. Were beaten at the contest, looked slow. So, yeah, it's another game they'll have to live with for a long off-season.
Probably had 2 or 3 players only who would think that they had an okay game, whereas the Western Bulldogs, their opponent, there were 22 of them, weren't there, Lotto? And particularly the smaller guys.
Yeah, well, I think they're small guys who we're going to look at here. Caleb Daniel, best on ground. I think he's tough. He's skillful. He made great decisions. Then the next best, in my opinion, was Luke Dalhouse.
Yeah.
Just pace. So get Daniel wanted it more, gets it out to Luke Dalhouse. Picking early in the game. This marking, his aerial skills have gone to another level.
I thought you could make a case for him to be the best player on the ground. I thought the role he played, particularly early, was match influencing and set it up.
And he was on gaff for periods of that too. And then we also saw the last one there, Lockie Hunter, who's became one of the most improved players in the game, and he was also in the best 5 players.
Tom Boyd's game?
Tom Boyd, loved his physicality. He just competed really, really hard. I think John Giles and those guys were good matchups for him.
Yep.
And I think same again this week. He comes up against Ben McAvoy, Jack Fitzpatrick. He's just got to keep bringing that intensity, and he'll get the plaudits. They
do everything right under Luke Beveridge, don't they, the Bulldogs? And what we learned out of the weekend was their attention to detail is so extreme, to the point where the smothers became a key component to what they did.
You're lucky to get 2 or 3 smothers in a game. That was the 3rd there, and we're in the first quarter. This was number 4. It just keeps going and going. And the plan they came with, Luke Beveridge went with 1 tall defender, Hamling, 5 smalls. They said, we're going to run these guys off their feet. We're going to be harder. We're going to be tougher. And they did exactly that.
Okay. Clay Smith, his courage is unquestioned. Found himself in an awkward situation, but didn't flinch, did he, against Schofield here?
He's very, very lucky here that he doesn't get come off worse for wear. He's too brave for his own good. He needed to turn his back and take the force through the back, not the front. So anyway, it just exemplifies what where they were willing to go, the Bulldogs, to win that game of footy.
Okay, 2 teams are through, Geelong and GWS. Who goes to play them in the prelim finals, Lotto? Start with Hawks and Dogs.
I'll back the Western Bulldogs again for pace and for toughness to beat the Hawks. And I think at the SCG, with not a lot of confidence, I'll go the Sydney Swans.
So
what about you,
the 2 losing qualifying finalists?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a bit worried about Hawthorn. I think the Bulldogs are on such a
I said the Bulldogs.
I think the Bulldogs are on such a nice roll, but I think the Swans will bounce back like you. Thanks, Lotto.
Thanks, Dano.
And thanks for watching Access All Areas. We'll see you again tomorrow for our first wash-up of the week. Keep an eye out for our thoughts on the Kangaroos and West Coast's 2016 seasons. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.